Yes, nice.
Okay.
Welcome. This is Krasimir. Angelov, so he is one of the major developers. Yes, Krasimir, welcome.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about natural language generation, obviously with grammatical framework. I'm presenting, but there are also a number of contributed to this project before. Their names are on the slide, but I should also acknowledge all the thousands of people who have developed linguistic resources for different languages which I have used, and I don't even know the names of all these thousands of people. So I'm really standing on the shoulders of a lot of people in that sense. And when I talk about language generation, I don't mean large language models, although we use neural and statistical methods to create resources. I prefer to use something that's more controllable. So I try to pick the best of both worlds. And a lot of the talk will depend on the grammatical framework coordinate, or as I call it, just GF coordinate. So I'm going to talk about this first. You can think about GF coordinate as a large lexicon covering 264 languages. It's kind of Wiktionary, but unlike Wiktionary, it's not a wiki, it's a database, although it's a database that is editable on the web. It still has WordNet style semantic relation, just like Princeton WordNet, but unlike Princeton WordNet, it's also integrated with syntax, and it also includes a server-side scripting language for developing applications. It's all free, open source, and it can be edited on the web. You can also find the link down there. I will show you some demos later. Of these 400 post languages, for now there are 45 core languages, let's say, which have really integrated syntax, and they are already quite a diverse set of languages. We have 11 Germanic languages. Scots I added just last week, and it's still not fully complete. Faroese, only morphology and very little bit of syntax. And these are all languages that you don't hear very often in conferences. There are 8 Romance languages, including French, and 7 Slavic languages. The Ukrainian, Belarusian, I started working on them about a week ago. They're not online yet, but they are in the pipeline. Macedonian contains morphology, very little syntax. And we have 3 Finno-Ugric languages, 2 Turkic languages, and 2 Bantu languages, thanks to converters in Africa, and 2 Indo-Aryan languages, 2 Semitic languages, and 7 more languages, each of its own family. This is overview of the core languages, but there are plenty of more. If you click on this link, you are pointed to an article where you can see a table of languages. These are all the 200 post languages, and as part of the process, we also made an evaluation to what extent languages corresponds to what extent these lexicons match lexicons in Wiktionary. You can see, for example, that Belarusian, for example, contains 73,000 words, and 13% of these words I can also find in Wiktionary, and the word that I find there is the same as in our dictionary. For the rest, maybe I don't find anything, or there is a mismatch. For the core languages, I can say a little bit more. You can see that, for example, for Estonian, I found 86% of the words in dictionary, and they are matching. 30% of the words that I found were not matching. So there are obviously mistakes, and this applies to all languages. I have extensively worked in verifying Swedish and Bulgarian. I occasionally do changes in other languages, but since I'm not fluent in 99% of them, I can do only as much as that. And in the process, we also added new words by looking at dictionary. So we incrementally improve coverage for all languages in this way. But it's important to know that for most of these 200 languages, we only have the lemmas and we gradually add more.
How were those chosen?
I added all languages for which I can find at least 2000 words. Okay, the structure of the dictionary, just like in WordNet, everything is organized around synsets. Synsets are groups of words with similar meanings, but unlike in WordNet, in the Princeton WordNet, in the GF WordNet, the synsets are two-dimensional. The synset is a set of abstract identifiers, and then for each identifier and each language, I can say, okay, family is semeistu, family, sukuin Finnish. This is taken from also, so this is definitely a mistake. And then family and useful and hem are in Swedish. And between these synsets, you have semantic relations like this is a hypernym of something, or hyponym, or a verb entails another verb, or etc. These are all familiar relations. I only added two more, which groups words which correspond to the male and female role. Like student is all student in English, but in many languages we have student for males, student for females, and then these two words are linked as well, which is important when you want to do natural language generation in many languages. Okay, so I won't use all the slides. Instead, I will switch now to a demo mode. So this is the web interface. And here, first, you select the language that you want to see. And then you can start looking for words. For example, neo is a very well-known ambiguous word in English. But as you can see, in many languages, the word is not ambiguous. So this is the body part, and the second one is the metal thing that you use with a hammer. And you can see that it's still the same word in English, but different in Bulgarian, different also in Swedish, Norwegian, and French, Italian, etc. So the splitting into abstract identifiers makes it possible to maintain several different languages. Another example, go to water. Again, you see the translations, but what you don't have usually in the WordNet is any syntax or morphology. Well, here you can click on a word, for example, in Catalan, and then you see that it's aqua and aguas in plural. If you click on Bulgarian, you see a lot more forms. And if you try Finnish, for example, the forms are even more. This is all part of the resource. And you can also get a list of examples, just like in a normal WordNet. But here the examples are in all the possible languages. The way in which this was created is that I first parse the English sentence, I do manual disambiguation and some changes. And then this is generalized to the target languages. Again, I have worked on Bulgarian and Swedish, but then for the other languages, I made just as many fixes as possible. So not all of them are correct, and sometimes the translations are too literal. The examples are also word aligned. So if I click on a word, I see the corresponding words in all other languages. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, now it's as it should. And then you see also the meaning of that word below. And for some examples, at least, you also get the word frame structures. For example, that's something is the object or the subject, and etc. Another useful thing is that about 25% of the data is also linked to Wikipedia. If I click on an image, then I'll see the corresponding article about water in Wikipedia. And this is one of the major sources which I use to extract the terminology in all possible languages. Okay, let's go back to slides. The links to the Wikipedia, by the way, help a lot because sometimes you read the gloss of a word in the dictionary and you still have no idea what this gloss is talking about. But if you have the link, you can actually read the entire article. Okay, so this is morphology, examples, WordNet frames, and linking to Wikidata. Motivation for Wikidata, source of automatic translations, helps to understand what something is about, and it's also the thing that currently supports the natural language generation in Grammatica framework for Wikipedia. This is one of the projects I'm working on. The dictionary contains, the core set contains about 10,000 words, and they contain adjectives, nouns, and verbs used in the everyday language. But to that, I have also added a collection of first and second names of people. So by combining them, I can describe people that are not in the lexicon, but syntactically I can construct the name. Like Isaac and Newton becomes Isaac. So for 64,000 names and 531,000 family names, they together describe about 7 million people. And on top of that, there is about 3 to 4 million names of places in the dictionary. When you search, very often you see that, oh, there is a place called place, for example, somewhere, and it's sometimes a bit surprising. All of this is built on top of the grammatical framework. Arne already talked about the language a little bit. I squeezed all his entire introduction to only one slide. Basically, grammatical framework is a statically typed functional programming language. It's specialized for the description of natural languages. It's reversible, meaning that you can use it to generate and to parse text. And it's one of its unique characteristics, not unique, but one of its important characteristics is that it has the concept of abstract syntax. So we have words, and then you can combine these words by using combinators. You apply this function to this one, then you get something else, and then compositionally you do something for the adjectives, and then you put the adjective and the noun together, and you get an expression. So this is the abstract syntax, and there is also an API, which is like a set of combinators which are more convenient to put. They are shorter. You can only apply one function, not together. And this is the thing that helps us to construct sentences and also the example that I showed you in the web demo. So the dictionary mainly contains words, a few multi-word expressions, but we have also recently started adding constructions. There are things that are not composed of single words, but can be expressed by combining existing words in a dictionary. I don't want to put them in addition in a dictionary. So, for example, if you want to talk about square kilometers, you can put the noun square in the noun kilometer, and then you get the corresponding in every language. But this construction works mostly in Romance, not Romance, mostly Germanic languages, but in some Romance languages it works as well. Another way to construct square kilometers is to use the adjective square in combination with noun kilometer, and then because of this dichotomy of how you construct this expression in different languages, they have to be expressed different, separately for a set of languages. And there is always a default which I use whenever I don't know anything more about the language. So this is still a small collection of about 20-30 expressions, but it will grow soon by parsing data. Okay, so in total, the grammar contains 264 languages, 45 of them has syntaxes, and in total, the lexicon contains 4 to 5 million abstract lexemes. The grammar in total is 78 gigabytes, and it now lives on our server. You can also access it locally, but most people don't want to download gigabytes of data. So then for that, there is a Python library, which is very similar to the WordNet library MLCP, but it has a GA flavor. So basically, you install this package, and then you import a module. And when you import for the first time, it will give you this message, which tells you that the library is there, but the data is not there. So then usually the first thing that you do is that you say, okay, download only English or only French, whatever. Okay. Start downloading the data, and then it's ready to be used. There is one easy way to do experiments. But it's not only support that language. We mostly work in Haskell. There are some codes in C and etc. In addition to the semantic relations, the GA coordinate also contains a graph embedding produced by using graph2vec. You can also access it here online, but okay, I don't want to go into that. It's basically this cloud of words that are floating around. And the important thing is that this is a way to use the lexicon in combination with neural network, because they don't understand anything about symbols. All that they want is vectors, and this is how we combine it with machine learning. Okay, how was this resource created? Well, by collecting a lot of existing resources and then running some algorithms on top of that. I will give a short summary. First of all, there is a resource called Open Multilingual WordNet, where people have combined a number of existing WordNets created by different teams around the world. The advantage of this is that if I have a resource in that direction, then it's already manually checked. I know that every word has the right meaning. On the other hand, I don't know. The WordNets, they only contain meaning equivalent. They don't contain pronunciation equivalence. If I see family and house in one synset, I don't know whether family is whatever is the word in the target language, or I might align it with house by mistake. So it's not the only thing that is needed to create a database like this. The other advantage is that in this collection, many of the WordNets are very small. They might contain a few thousand words, and that's all, which is disadvantageous if you want to create a WordNet with thousands of words, because it gives unfair advantage to some of the words. There are also other resources. Pondex, for example, is a database which contains thousands of bilingual dictionaries between hundreds of languages. By intersecting those, you can also get a lot of data. The good thing is that it's available for many languages. The bad thing is that you see that this word is a translation of that word, but you don't know in what sense. For example, if you have nail in English, you don't know whether they're talking about the finger thing or the hammer thing. The part-of-speech tags are also not annotated, so sometimes you might get a verb in the place of a noun. And sometimes the dictionaries contain explanations rather than translations. So some filtering is still needed even if you use that lexicon. But basically, you take everything that you have, you try to combine it into one, and that's the only possible way. Wikidata is another source. The disadvantage is it contains only nouns. But on the other hand, I already have this semantic mapping between the WordNet and the Wikidata. So if I have an entry there, I'm almost sure that this is a good translation. Although there are also exceptions where people, for example, write mathematical group as the title of the article. Well, in natural language generation, we just want to say group. If you start writing a text about groups in math, you don't repeat mathematical group every time. It's also available for many languages. This is another bonus. Wiktionary is yet another resource. The problem there is that I still have to align it somehow with the WordNet. The way in which I did this is that I take the gloss in WordNet, this one, and I take all possible glosses for the same word in Wiktionary. Then I use the ACE-part neural methods to see which one is the closest to what I have in my dictionary. I then did a little bit of manual validation, and this made an alignment between different senses in WordNet and Wiktionary. So then from that I can extract more words. But since it's automatic, some mistakes are still possible, as always. And because of that, in the dataset, I mark all the entries with two possible flags. If you see something underlined with red, this means that I took the translation from somewhere. I have no idea whether it's correct. Most of the time it is, but sometimes it's not. If you see something underlined with yellow, this means that it comes from another WordNet. So someone has validated it to some extent, but I'm still not sure whether this is the right translation. And if you don't see any color under the word, then I have already validated that word. And I should have showed you one more thing. You can also see an overview of all the languages if you click here. And then see this diagram. Green means validated, red still guessed. So you can see that many languages are just in the red spectrum. Bulgarian is almost finished. Catalan is in a pretty good shape. English is so green because I started from English. Finnish is also pretty good. And German somewhere in the middle. Okay, so for these 45 languages, you have morphology, we have lemmas, we have syntax, but ideally, I want to have all the 200 and plus languages in the database. So what do we do with the rest of them? Well, we have already started a project to automatically learn the morphology and the syntax of those languages. For example, morphology can learn by looking at the data in Wiktionary. For many languages, they contain also the inflection forms, but they don't have the rules which are used to inflect those words. But this can be learned by data. Syntax is more difficult, but you can look at tree banks. See, for example, how the adjectival modification works and how where the verb is placed in the sentence, etc. Or another thing that you can do is to generalize from an existing language. For example, I started working with Scots by just taking the Scottish dictionary and the English grammar, and they pretend the Scots is English, which works most of the time, but Scots has some features that it doesn't share with English. So then you read about these differences and you only make small changes wherever this is necessary. So now we're doing this pilot language with Albanian, Belarusian, Faroese, Kazakh, Macedonian, and Ukrainian. Some of them are already on the web. Okay. So this is the status of the lexicon. Now, how do we do natural language generation by that? With that, well, we do scripting on the server, again in grammatical framework. There is a simple shell-like interface where you can try simple things. For example, since we talk about math, how this is big enough. This is let's say that I want to use the phrase open set like in topology. I can just write it, but then this will not scale up. I have to convert this to GF syntax. So I just have to find where the word open is defined in the dictionary. Open has a number of different meanings. If you go through all of them, it's too slow, but you can just click on the main mathematics. And then you see that this is the sense open 11 is a sense of the mathematical open set. And the same I do with set. Again, mathematics. And I click here. And now I have the two lexical entries in the dictionary. I want to combine these two words in a single expression. For that, I apply the function mkcn, which takes these two arguments and produces a new phrase. I run this, and then I get the text in English. But since this is a multilingual resource, I can just as well switch now to another language, for example, French. I run the program again, and I get the French version. I click on Bulgarian. I get the Bulgarian version, Swedish, or German, maybe. So you can see that you can pretty much forget about what language this is about. You just
Russian. I thought the Russian.
Russian.
Yeah, just to see what it will show.
Yes. You can pretty much forget about what language this is, but not always. I will show examples. But this was a simple thing. I'll switch back to English. And now I remove this because I have not worked that much into maths. I will show examples that come from the Wikipedia project. I want to say something about France. And France is an entity described in Wikidata. I can search here for France. And I select it, and then I see that France is corresponding to Q142 in the database. Once I do this, I can use the variable QID here with the same value as over there. You can see that this is the same. And then I can start converting this to a natural language. It's obviously France. And then what else? Well, the database or the Wikidata contains a lot of information about countries. For example, I want to see how many people live in France. And I can do this by extracting the entity for France, again with the same QID. And in this entity, there are different properties for different data that I would want to access. For example, property 31 is the class of the entity. So if I do this, I will see that France is an entity of class Q, this, and that. This is pretty unreadable, but I can convert this to a natural language by applying expression again. And I see that France is a country. And I want to know how many people live in this country, which I can access by using property 1082. And the value of this property is a record, which gives me the number and the unit. In this case, it's just number doesn't have units, but if it was kilometers, then I'll see kilometers here. I'll just add amounts to get the number only. But you see that there are many numbers here. The reason is that the population of every country can be measured many times, and then they contain data about this historical countings as well, which we can also see by querying for that. And then the date is accessible with property 585. Actually, this is a qualifier. The qualifier is something that describes the value of another property. If I query for that as well, okay, again, this is a record. I can stick it only to the time field. I see when this measurement was done. Okay, so now we can use that to do a little bit of natural language generation. The first thing that I want to change is that this number is shown in this scientific notation, which I don't find very readable. I'll just convert it by applying the function decimal, mk decimal. And now the number is formatted according to the convention in the complete language. In English, we put commas between every 3 digits, for example. If I switch to French, instead of commas, you will see spaces. Okay, so now this is a little bit better. You can also see that now country is translated to French. Now to make this into a sentence, what should I do? First, I want to get rid of all these records and only show the most recent data for France, which I can do by using a construction, which looks like this. Select from the set of possibilities over there the last one. This is what -1 means. And then the selection happens in this way. The second thing after select must be a tuple of 2 things, the data that I want to get and the sorting criteria. So I'm going to sort by time chronologically, and then I want to get the last one, which will be the most recent data. So I say that it should be a pair of things. Now I have 3 things, so I should put extra brackets here. And if I rerun it, I see only the most recent data. And the rest is still the same. Now let's make this into a sentence. First, the number is not just a number, but this is something that talks about the number of people, the inhabitants. So turn this into a noun phrase. Actually, inhabitant, and because inhabitants in many languages have also a masculine and feminine form, I should specify which one I want. And now run it again. You see that the word is there, and it already has the plural suffix. I don't need to do anything special. And of course, if I switch to another language, the word is also in the target language, and it has the plural form. Okay. I want to combine lands or country with a number of speakers. So then I want to say something like country with that many inhabitants. This I can do by, so this is the word country. I need to manipulate it a bit to add the adverb with and the number. This I don't need, and this must become an adverb now. With preposition and parentheses here, I close this one, and I think it should be fine. Okay. Yes. This is not right. This is this image. And I miss parentheses here. Yes, okay. France, country with inhabitants. Now we can also turn this into a complete sentence by applying, okay, France is a type LN, location name. We need to turn this into a noun phrase. So apply MKNP to the expression for France. Now nothing has changed except that this is now a noun phrase. This is common noun. And here I miss the indefinite article country. I have got this as well, MKNPAC. One more parenthesis at the end. Yes. It's a country. The couple is the only thing that I am still missing. Rose. Yet another French with this. And now I get a complete sentence. And of course, I can just switch to French and read it in French, or I can switch to Bulgarian and read it in Bulgarian, or Swedish and I get it in Swedish. You combine the data, you combine the language, but you don't do anything language most of the time. Okay, so this was the quick live coding. I talked about this, and I talked about this, and about this. Yes, now content warning. In natural language generation, especially in Wikipedia, you have to be careful how you construct your sentence. Not because I generated the sentence, France is a country with not many inhabitants. What about if I don't know how many people are living in France? I still want to say that France is a country. And if you do this in a naive way, then you get a cascade of if statements. If I know how many people are living, and I know that this is a country, then I generate one sentence. If I know that this is a country, but I don't know how many people live there, this is another case. And then the third case is if I don't know anything else but the name, then maybe I can say France is an entity or something like this. Basically, it becomes useless if you don't know any more facts about France. But the point is that we don't want to have these if statements all the time. It just becomes a nightmare, a spaghetti code with if statements. To make this more human friendly, you can use special constructions for content warning. So in this example, here I say, okay, this is the expression that will produce a country. It's assigned to the variable cn0. Then I use that variable in the second expression, where I also add the adverb with that many inhabitants. And then I don't just return the second one, but I have a choice. This construction tells my language, try this one. If you have enough data generated, everything is fine. If I have something that is missing for this particular case, try the second one, and the second one will only tell France is a country. If this fails as well, then the whole thing will fail, so I will not say anything about France, because otherwise it will be stupid to just say France is an entity, or France is something. So then I prefer not to say anything. But if I want, I can continue the chain in this way. So then all if statements are gone. I just keep the core of the program in a more readable way. Now this was natural language generation for plain text, but usually we don't want only that. We want nice formatted text, which is of course also possible. Here I have only one sentence, but I want to see it in a nicer way. I want to generate an article about France. So I'll just start using HTML mixed in with the rest of the language. H1 is the heading or the title of my article. It will be about France, so I'll put the expression UAD. And ending the tag, I must put everything in some kind of tag, so on div. And then the sentence itself, I want to put in a paragraph, closing the paragraph, and then closing the top level div. And running this again. Oh, yes, I forgot this parenthesis here. And now you see that you have nice formatted text. Okay, that was markup for the language, and we used these techniques that I mentioned already to generate articles about countries, cities, universities, professions, people, languages, and chemical elements. Most of these article types, they were done in a previous prototype where the natural language generation was done in Python, but now we have a new language, and some of these demos were not transferred to the new language yet. But the articles countries are already here. So if I search for France, I don't get just one sentence, but I get I get an article which is not as extensive as the article that you can read in Wikipedia, but it's still something. It tells that this is a country with people, has borders with Spain, Andorra, etc. Says something about the demography and education, administrative units, political situation, economy, and climate if I have something. And the articles are editable on the web, just like Wikipedia, but instead of writing text and markup as in Wikipedia, here you write GF code, the code is then executed, you see the tags here, the HTML stuff, some computations and etc. So this code is run for every country and I get something back. The motivation for this work is that now we can scale to more languages that are now missing in Wikipedia. We can automatically generate text for those as long as we have the language resources. But once you are able to generate articles, then you can go one step further, because you can also adapt articles to concrete readers. For example, here I talk about the area of the country, but there are people who are not used to the metrical units, so I can just switch to imperial units, and then instead of kilometers, I will see miles. And if there was data about the climates, actually there is more data about Spain, the climate at least. You can see that, for example, the lowest temperature in Spain was -30 on this date. If I switch to imperial units, I will see the temperature in Fahrenheit. So this can go a long way. Here I have only a simple example, but for example, if I open this other URL, here it's used for more things. For example, this is the beginning of a phrasebook-like application where I can choose different kinds of phrases, and then I can see them in different languages. And here you can see that's the same mechanism with customizations is used. So this is part of the language. You basically specify a set of options, and then you don't write any HTML. Everything automatically is rendered on the web page. There is some JavaScript which takes care of this, and it's still purely functional. There is no imperative code which creates combo boxes and etc. You only focus on the semantics of the article. And as I told you, most of the time you don't need to think about the language in which you write the article. Something comes out, at least if the library is well developed. But sometimes this is not avoidable. The languages tend to use one and the same construction in different ways. For example, for the countries, it happened that the way in which you say that a country has this and that neighbors is expressed in different ways. And in these cases, we usually list the exceptions. And then for every exception, I list how this is actually rendered in that language. And if the language is not one of those, then I go to the default clause where I just generate something that will be literally translated from English. So this is probably hard to read, but I can give you an example. If I want to say that a number of people attended the conference, this is how I say it in English. But in other languages, you don't say it like this. Maybe you say many people attended the conference, because a number of is a kind of construction. And then these constructions are handled in this way. Okay, so this was about Wikipedia and articles for people and countries. I looked at the data for math. Unfortunately, for the different math concepts, there is very little formalization in Wikidata, so I can't automatically generate the text, but I can do something else. For example, if I look at open set again, this time in Wikipedia, the image comes from Wikipedia. The text doesn't come from there. If we look at the code, it's just sentences rendered in the GF syntax. This way of writing text is orders of magnitude slower than just writing in English. But on the other hand, you get automatically many languages. It still can be improved. For example, combining a parser with the rest of the ecosystem here around Wikipedia can make it quicker to just parse the English sentence and output the text. This is in the to-do list for now, but it will happen. The only sentence that I can say based on Wikidata is the last one. That is a concept studied in topology, because this is the only useful property that I find in Wikidata about open sets. So the last sentence actually is something like this. So I extract the entity, and then I say concept and study in, and then the actual fields I can start using this property. The rest has to be manually added, but this is also, the fact that it's possible is also an advantage, because Wikidata doesn't contain a lot of world facts. For example, if I search for English, the language, there is an article for English, which is now, this is work in progress, which only contains one sentence in the beginning. It contains a list of countries where the language is spoken, some images, and something started for the grammar, not complete. But it doesn't say a lot of other things that a normal Wikipedia article would say. For example, English is an international language. This is a fact which we know, but Wikidata doesn't know. But if you want to have comprehensive, complete articles, have to add this information regardless of the fact that they are missing. Okay. And that's actually the end of my talk. This is a never-ending journey. Just like Wiktionary, we can't say at any point that Wiktionary or Wikipedia is complete project and there is nothing else to be done. The same with natural language generation and grammatical framework and many other things. Thanks.
For this nice talk. Today quite a lot. GF. So please questions, comments, suggestions, etc. Ideas to GF. Yeah, welcome.
I would suspect that your approach is economical if for every 264 people who speak a particular language, there is one GF expert. Right?
Yes.
But right now it seems like more like the ratio is 2 to 8 billion. So is that project doomed?
You are right, but we can also automatically generate grammars, and this is what we are doing. I know that I can find native speakers of Somali or Navajo who also speak, who can program in GF. But I can find people who can speak maybe Swedish and do functional programming in GF, and they can get resources and automatically generate something. They hopefully over time the ratio improve and we'll start adding menu additions, because I don't believe that automatic learning of grammars is so good yet. You still need some tiny details that even if you read the grammar book, they also miss things. Where do I put this particle when it's a question, for example? At some point, you need also native speaker, but then sometimes it's enough that you tell me, for example, how this works in Navajo, and then I know something about Jeff, and I say, oh, I can put it here, and then it works. So I don't need one Jeff programmer per language. That's the conclusion.
Okay.
Some more. Then I have a related question. One is, how many experts do you have in Bulgaria, except you? And especially one who is verbal in mathematics.
Still zero.
Okay, the other one is, you mentioned about the grammar book, so now and then I try to address some phenomena, syntactic phenomena, and corresponding semantics to see how we can do it if I do in formal mathematics, and get completely irritated because famous, prestigious grammars, Oxford, I don't think I have found a perfect one. They mix up syntactic and semantic concepts. Complete mess up.
Yeah.
As if they don't have expert on semantics. Because when we are speaking naturally some language, without being expert on distinctions between syntax and semantics, then we don't pay. That's the game of the natural language. We use it to express, we use syntax, words, and especially inflections, etc., to express semantic concepts. And there is, unless one is expert, there is no distinction in our brain. So as if our brains are molded by our education system into syntax, as if to pretend that this is the semantics.
I think that the reason is that when you write a book, this is still very informal. Even if you try to be formal, there is no formal checking. It's very easy to forget or miss something when you write. Even in tree banks, which are also common valid, like I remember in the pen tree bank years ago, I was looking at prepositions, and I found that fiscal, like fiscal printer, was a preposition. This is obviously a mistake. But the trees, they are not formed, they are syntactically formal, but there is no semantic checking. So you can put parentheses around all kind of garbage and say this is a pronoun, noun, whatever. So that's the reason, that's the problem with the books. They are still very useful if you don't know the language, but you can't trust them completely. Yeah, we did the similar thing with morphology. We read in a book, this language has 5 conjugations. And you look at the data and you find 200. The problem is that they put maybe 20 different conjugations into one bag because they are very similar, but there is tiny mutation, maybe A becomes E somewhere because of some sound pause. But this is just overlooked when you try to write a book that is human understandable.
Maybe GF will improve the situation with the formal, with official grammar books. And
So we have been talking about this to generate books from formal grammars for a while now. Still have not done it. It will happen.
so for Bulgarian, there is one prestigious set of 3 volumes issued by Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. One is morphology, the other one is syntax. I forgot to one, but 3, and none of them is talking about semantics. And the 3 of them, in whichever I look, it's a mixture. As if they don't know whether I'm talking about semantics or about syntax. So, and I believe that this is due to the training from our school, that the teachers do not train the children. So that's the game of the natural language, to express semantics in natural language with some syntax, and then, yeah.
So I would like to understand better what it means that something is semantic or syntactic grammar. And one way to see it is that if it is something that only refers to the language, then it's syntax. But it refers to something which you cannot decide from the language, it is semantic. So let's say, for instance, that in some French grammars, and this is quite typical in languages with moods, they say that if you have a main clause which expresses will or desire or something, so then the subordinate clause is in a subjunctive. And so this is a typical semantic condition which you cannot make a computer program that somehow finds out whether this verb expresses will or desire or something. The syntactic way to do it is that you give a list of verbs and say that after these verbs, and I think it would be helpful for these learners of the language to have the syntactic conditions rather than something which is difficult to decide. So in that way, I think the grammar books could learn from implementations of grammars.
In the end, semantic is an intentional condition rather than, and in these books you want to have extensional things, which are fine if the language doesn't change. Then there's no different. If the language is fixed and the use of language is fixed, then syntax and semantics, unfortunately, are not distinguishable by definition. And only when there's a change, then semantics actually in the syntax semantics interface.
So the intention
that
resides, yes.
Yeah,
it gives us a kind of an explanation of why.
Right.
But it's not as such a decidable condition.
No. And in math, that's particularly interesting because we changed the language of math on average in every paper 3 times. Right? We extend the lexicon, so we need semantics. For English, it's essentially immutable for all practical purposes. But math is mutable.
That's true, and the ambiguity. So whether it's in mathematics or more formal, and there mathematicians are more careful, but nevertheless the ambiguity continues there too.
I don't think it's a notion of being careful. It's more about the mutability of language. And mathematicians are, in my experience, especially handicapped in distinguishing between semantics and syntax, because they pride themselves that they can do then the purpose of the good notations is always to muddle up syntax and semantics.
but the hope is that when example, process of formal but natural mathematical texts, mathematicians, one has to delimit the subject, whether it's in algebra, whether it's in geometry, because some topics are more complicated and they sit on the top of more simple topics and then mix them up.
Algebra. That's the end of that end of the story. And I lost a language.
They don't, as you say, doing art meetings. So
There is, I suggest something. So there is a textbook. It's a very excellent software package actually of Stanford, open proof text package. So there, the text itself, the purpose of the book is to teach students starting from, it can be adapted to different level of course. So most of the logical, first order logic concepts, the logical operator, and then it goes to the quantifiers and single quantifier, multiple quantifiers. And when you get to, from semantics, from models, when you go to formal proofs, they use natural deduction. It's a not an automatical prover. There is an automatical prover, but it's not accessible for the student. But there is a, it is a you build up interactively proofs, and each concept there, starting with the logical operators, going up to the quantifiers, each rule in natural deduction is paired with informal proof, and there are a lot of examples. Remember, from algebra, irrational, to prove the square root of 2, is irrational, etc. There is informal proof, and it is written very, very carefully, so that they claim, and usually this is indeed the case, that one follows the natural language proof carefully. You get translation into the natural deduction proof. So I think that's a good way to try to see how to those rather than the 100 theorems to start this correspondence. And also the other side, a formal natural deduction proof to translate it into, but by hand. Not, there is no software there. That's what I actually suggest.
automated.
So there, everything is by hand. When you translate a natural language sentence that contains conjuncts and so forth, and especially the quantifiers, there is for each one concept, there is a lesson how you translate it into formal, into first order logic, and the other way around. But this is the person, the student has to do it by hand. No, there is no automatic. And then it's very carefully, for many, many years, very carefully. So, for example, for the model theory, Tarski's world is the model theory. So each exercise, they give up to 20 sentences in natural language, translate them into first order logic, and check in this situation there is their formalization. Tarski's world, the language of blocks, check it, and there, as you go, it's wonderfully prepared. As you go, you can, by examples, counter examples, interactively, it's assistant, model checking assistant. Students learn how to translate and how to structure natural language, how to structure the quantifiers. And they point to the ambiguity, but in first order logic, not express ambiguity unless parallel. And the most exciting is the proofs. It's again, there is a game there that the prover, its assistant. The only drawback is that you can't get the textbook. You can get for free. You'll find it on the web. You'll find probably, you'll solicit probably from them the software packages. The one that one cannot get is the real prover, which is great systems that checks the solutions of the students. What is the name again? Well, if you want, I can send you a link to. It's a wonderful. I have been teaching with it. It's a wonderful package. So I'm going to yes, I'm going to ask the students to write 10 truth tables with more than 3 variables. We're going to check there. There is a, I even don't assign, don't care anymore to teach propositional logic. So they learn by themselves with tables. The interesting thing there is stars this world, which is model checker, and it's everything because it's a finite. Those are finite modes, so it's decidable. And even the more interesting, which is very difficult for linguistic students, but it's difficult even for computer science students. It's natural deduction. And it's a beautiful game, yes. So I think it's good to try to check that those lessons, those chapters, the correspondences between informal and formal, the other way.
In your 264 languages, how many of those languages have large or medium-sized language models?
Not many, I guess. Because many of them are endangered and maybe dead languages. For example, I have lower and upper Sorbian. Not remember which one, but one of them is dead, the other one is very small.
Yes, I know the person who makes the only newspaper. He is kind of the language model.
Yeah, so one of the motivations to improve the digital environment of these languages. Probably there is no Wikipedia in Sorbian either, which means that many people are disadvantaged in this way. And at the end, they think that their language is not worth studying anymore. They don't pass it to their children and etc. So if it goes like this, it will be English only at the end, or some version of English. Another interesting thing that I hear about Wikipedia is that even if you speak and read English, you only have access to 30% of Wikipedia. The rest contains articles written in other languages about something that is important for this country, for example. If, for example, maybe there are articles in Bulgarian about something in Bulgaria, and they are not accessible to other speakers, well, even if you don't want to learn the language, if you visit the country, you might still want to learn something interesting. So the barrier is there even if you only know English. Yeah.
So one of the things that I've always wondered about whether language technology can help us with, as far as I know, kind of the movement from the various Wikipedias to Wikidata is mostly manual.
Yes.
And that's just basically a probably finite modular language information process that we could automate or partially automate or at least support.
There are some things that are automatically extracted. But again, a human has to write a program which goes to the articles and find the data. The bigger problem is that most of the content in Wikipedia is not formalizable as Wikidata, because Wikidata is RDF model, objects and links between them. And that's why using only Wikidata as a source is not enough. You should be able to add arbitrary content in your articles, and whenever possible, use the Wikidata. For example, one of the things that happens is that even in Sweden, when the current prime minister came into power, on the next day I checked Wikidata, and it was still citing the old one. So I added this information in Wikidata. But then it still took a few days until different Wikipedia articles were updated to say that this is the new prime minister. Well, this could have happened automatically if I change only one source. Other things are more difficult, like English is international language. What about? Well, at some point, maybe Chinese will become international language, but these kind of things happen a lot slower, and it's not worthwhile to automatize this task. Probably this fact is never going to be added in Wikidata.
Then there are these discrepancies. So we had a student making this experiment with generating articles about languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing in Wikidata is that it lists what tenses there are in the language.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't show that, right?
Yeah.
For which were quite different. Like, I mean, even for closely related languages, it was seems that they have a very different concept of what it means to be a tense in a language.
Yeah, again, linguistic traditions are different.
And the alternative is to use the formal grammars to do this.
I remember that we actually looked at the set of all possible tenses in Wikidata, and there are thousands of different tenses.
Yes, that they are.
I don't believe that they're all different. I don't know, we found a tense which only
There's some different names and different UIDs.
Yes. So there are some instances.
Probably Bulgarian is among the Slavic language, but perhaps Bulgarian is the one with most.
It all depends on who is adding the data.
At
Maybe
one
no
point-
one added the data, and then it won't
At
mention
one
any
point, I
tenses.
tried to, again, from those 3 academic volumes, it looked to me that they refer to more than 20, 24 tenses, because they count also moods and
Yeah, yes, that's the kind of it's. So what was the example now?
Example of what?
So if we, let's say, compare tenses that they show for French or for Spanish,
We can see.
because
Yeah, this is English.
this is English, yes. Spanish, because so if you look at the yeah, that's kind of rather
but nevertheless here they are separated. So
and if you have French and Italian, so the point is that they have
A lot more.
yeah, the point is that they have approximately the same system of tenses, except that Spanish has a couple more than French. But you see here
This is the opposite.
is the opposite, because they seem to, for instance, if you look at this a little bit, so you see that present imperative, past imperative, what is that? And imperative is also a mood, and
Yeah.
so this is quite a
This is about the formalization, so I guess it can be improved. We
Well,
just render whatever we find in
Yes.
Wikidata.
yes.
But for many things, I think they could have formalized the data better. Even for cities, there are thousands of different types of cities. For example, there's a village in Bulgaria, municipality in Sweden. Well, this is the same from just the location different. It should not be different. Plus, yeah, the other interesting thing about Wikipedia is that different editions, they state different facts. For example, when before Sweden joined the NATO, on the next day, the English Wikipedia was updated. Sweden is NATO, and probably the Swedish one was also updated. Then I looked at in Bulgarian. A few months later, and maybe it's improved now, but a few months later, it still stated that Sweden is not member of NATO and will probably never join because the army has never been in battle for hundreds of years and is not well prepared to join NATO. I don't know, maybe this is changed. I can check if it's different now.
I have a question again. You mentioned at one point some certain languages and you listed Macedonian,
Yes.
but not Bulgarian. So actually,
No, both are there.
I think there was one slide where.
Yes, this is the language that we try to bootstrap automatically. And yeah, here problem.
Yes, so here we don't see Bulgarian.
Yes, because Bulgarian is done by hand. Then from Macedonian, I used our tools to automatically bootstrap the morphology. Now for the syntax, it's very easy to just copy the Bulgarian syntax. I know I need to make a few changes, how the future is structured, and there were some more things that I don't know right now, but the syntax is almost the same. So then this will be a very easy job to do. Kazakh is a similar example. It's mostly Turkish, except that some of the words are in Russian. Ukrainian and Belarusian, I guess probably I can copy the Russian morphology. Albanian is a tougher case because it's not similar to anything else. Faroese, if you take the Icelandic grammar and plug Faroese lexicon, you'll probably get pretty close. So that's one way to fill in the gaps.
So actually, Macedonian and South Balkan languages,
Yeah.
they can, together with Bulgarian grammar,
Yes.
those can be exchanged and translated
It's a little bit more difficult with Serbo-Croatian. I started that, but they have case system like in Russian or Macedonian Bulgarian has
because disappeared.
it almost has disappeared. Yeah.
Even I see the vocative has disappeared.
Yes.
And I get irritated because it's a nice thing to have a vocative in the names.
Yeah, actually, you are the only one who uses vocative when you talk to me.
Looks to me, I try to use vocative.
Yes, Yeah, I don't mind.
They introduce extraordinary ambiguity, and you cannot change their mind. In the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, the language people, Institute of Bulgarian Language, or whatever they're called, they introduced a comma into the congratulations in the written form. Здравей, Krasimir, and they'll put a comma between them. And to whom are you? This comma introduces ambiguity. So to whom are you saying hello? So hello, Krasimir. And they put a comma between hello and Krasimir. And to whom they're telling hello? To the audience, and then they turn to Krasimir. So it's a very funny ambiguity there.
Most of the foreign names and even many Bulgarian more modern names, they just don't have vocative. And people have just stopped using it. Full definite form of the nouns.
Okay, yes.
This is a very common mistake, and probably this will disappear as well one day.
Hopefully it will disappear because very artificial.
Yes.
But actually it comes from a historical change in the writing system of Bulgaria. The old Bulgarian that used special symbol, special idea. It was extraordinarily wonderful way for disambiguation and for machine translation and for machine processing of Bulgarian language. And before the socialist time, before the Second World War, they changed depending who is in the parliament, because some professor from the language side, they'll go into the parliament, and whatever they favored, they either took away the special symbol or put it back. So it was a very political issue. And then after Second World War, the Communist Party became a government, and they entered into the parliament, and they forever wiped out this because that is related to the definition.
I don't know the history, but I know.
But that's the history. It's a political, ideological thing.
Yes.
Somebody very influential entered into the parliament and said, remove that and introduce ambiguity.
So since we're in a math language conference, there's a fundamental difference between ordinary English, Albanian, Faroese language, things like chair or so, which you learn from your mother taking you by the hand and saying, this is the chair, she's not a chair, he's not a chair, this is not a chair, there's another chair. Okay. And math, where we say, a plurisubharmonic function is, and then comes the definition. And I bet most mothers don't take you by the hand and say, this is not plurisubharmonic function. And there seems to be a difference in the way
Yes.
words get their meanings.
Yes.
And most of us for chair can't even say the definition.
Right, yeah.
Only a partial one, and then you can. And it seems to me that something like mathematician as a language is very different from the other small languages here. And I wonder what we learned from it.
I'm not quite sure this is true, because when I read articles, they're full of everyday expressions. Once we know this, let's prove that this other, right, so all of these are fewer words, which are everyday words.
Yes, so technical language is a mixture of
Yes, it's a mixture.
everyday words and technical ones, and the technical ones are the interesting ones. And they're especially, they're kind of born differently from the everyday ones. And
Yes.
you seem to be concentrating on the everyday ones,
Yes,
rightfully so.
yes.
But since we're on a math language conference, I would like you to speculate on.
I think that it's a matter of adding more mathematical concepts. There are some, I didn't show this, but
You had open set.
yes, so this was one example. And if I click here on mathematics, there are 500 math-specific terms. There are also other things that are math related, but are not actually labeled as this. There are also other words like, I was looking for magma, for example. I only have the common, the volcanic magma, but it's the same word actually in not many other names. I checked that in Wikipedia. But if there is an exception, then it must be added as a second meaning of magma. I also looked at commutative and associative adjectives. Commutative is in the math lexicon. Associative is not, because it also has everyday meaning. If it happens that it's the same in maths in all languages, problem solved. If it's not, we just need to add another sense. So I think maths is a subset of the general language. And when we write about math, we mix the two languages together. Something for maybe to give you an intuition, why do I need to care about this lemma? I say something in plain English, and then we start actually doing the lemma in more technical terms.
I completely disagree.
Okay.
I want to say something that you said in the beginning of this question, that it's more like a distinction between definitions by ostension and explicit definitions. So ostension means that you are not defining something in terms of other words, but you are pointing at something. And in mathematics, you also have some basic concepts that are not defined in terms of other concepts. And in everyday language, you certainly, let's say, find a good example, but there can be some special kind of a chair that you don't see as a child, but you learn it later by someone telling you that this kind of chair is a special chair that has 3 legs and whatever. And then you learn it in the same way as the mathematical concept by an explicit definition.
Then it's probably, I would think of that as a technical term, not of math, but maybe of, I don't know.
Of furniture.
Furniture science, yes.
But I think, so you can see it also here when you look at these glosses of the kind of little definitions of the word.
Yeah.
And they are often quite natural when they talk about these advanced concepts. But if you try to define something very simple, like a chair, then the definition is actually more difficult to understand than the word itself.
See it for one person, post to the back.
That's a typical thing that you cannot say to a child that, well, a chair, it's just a seat for one person with a
Yeah,
support.
then you go to the university and you heard that there is another chair as well. Which your mother didn't tell you about. Unless if she's a professor.
But the children, they learn a lot of semantics without ever, for example, animals. A lion, they have never seen a lion or elephant, but they learn from small
My
pictures.
children had books with lions.
Yeah, books and pictures, and so they don't need large language. Yes, the other day somebody told me that she read a paper, a research, that babies, they learn by statistical.
Oh yeah, and they should.
But are they born with large language models, babies?
Well, initial small language models.
Very quickly, for 1 year, they learn with just few words at home from their the kindergarten. Very few, a very small set of words, and
They still don't know about the professorship chair.
What do you do about kind of these kind of when the meaning intersects in different languages but has kind of like Bildung and education is the standard exam. So what do you do in your
the
syntax
difference
there?
between linearization and abstract.
So there are two different approaches. Either I make an approximation or I split the sentence into two. But at least I try to be consistent across languages. For example, I try to use the same concepts across the Slavic languages and the Germanic languages.
Yeah.
Then when you build an actual application, you, for example, use one concept in one language, and then you see the translation in the target language. Oh, I understand what this is, but I want to use another word here. Then you make a special case. Okay, in this language, I'm going to use building. Well, in this other language, education is fine.
How many meanings for snow do you have?
Snow. 2 or 3, I think. Because here is also snow. Okay, a number of these are names of people.
Yeah.
Locations.
Real snow.
So this is the real snow. Then the layer of snow, snowflakes. And this is cocaine and verbs and names again. But I know in other areas they might have more snow-like things, and then it might make sense to add another sense for some of them at least. Hopefully, one of them is the more general snow. Then I put it as snow in English, but then there will be snow 1A. Actually, there is an example for this. Yes, jacket in English has 2 different meanings in Swedish and actually in Bulgarian. One of them is the one that you go to official places with it, and the other one is that you have carry every day. In many languages, there are different things. And if there is a third kind of jacket, then we have to add.
There is even kožuch.
This is when you cover your car, for example, with or something else, a large object with something that has to protect it.
This is not
It's
kožuch.
not that kožuch that you.
Not the coat from skin, but something with the
Yes.
car.
Yes, and this is yet another jacket in dentistry, which has nothing to do with the jacket either.
And then you have to go to each language to see how this divided sense
Yes.
is. Because, for instance, in in Finnish you have to take out some of the alternatives from both of the sentences once that it has been split. But
Yeah,
it's,
then
yeah.
either you translate it in the same way in Finnish, you just repeat the same definition, or sometimes the word is just missing in one language, and then you leave a few attempts like these are, for example, missing entries. In this case, because I don't have the data, but it could be also because there is no word like this in the target.
What is the current status of the word drought?
Yes,
That was notorious something. English didn't see any
yes.
difference.
This is the medicine, and this is the
or narcotic.
narcotics. And actually, a few times I tried to use the word drug.
Yes.
Like I need to take my drugs, and then like what? But actually, I mean, I want to take my medicine. But immediately they think about drugs, like narcotics. So it looks like it's for international speakers. Drug is more like medicine, more like narcotic than.
So, because there is only one gloss, so if I want to.
Yes, this is again in English. It's one thing, but I split it into two because I see that.
Yeah, but if I and clearly the Finnish words are two of them are narcotic drugs and two of them are medical drugs. So
it's a phrase that I don't.
how do I know which ones to take away if I want to? Could we do this live editing so we see how it works?
So which one is the?
So which
the narcotic?
Let's go to the narcotic, for instance.
Yes, this is narcotic.
It is either hume or huumausaine. So you take out the middle ones.
Yes. This two.
Yeah, you take away these ones. Okay.
Some reason. Missing parentheses. No?
Maybe semicolon or something.
I should get a drop down box here, but
there's a missing opening after the.
if I remove this, do you think that it's still fine?
They will be fine. It's okay.
Now
Okay, then
it's
something
imaging.
on the server is happening. Okay, but we can fix that after.
But how did you know that it's the first one that is the narcotic?
In this case, this distinction is not an original word. I don't have different processes. But you need to look at one of the names which have differences. So I see this because there is difference here. But you don't know if you don't.
Should be switched. Droga and lekarstvo. It should be switched because lekarstvo is small. I don't know.
They are ordered by this frequency. Actually, again, they should be in the different order.
Yeah, that's narcotic.
Okay, so then it's actually the other way around.
That it didn't go through.
But the droga is it also the toivomusmedel?
It's about German.
No, a droga can be. That's it. Okay.
Okay, so then it's like in.
Very is
Yeah,
pharmacy.
drogery, yeah, but that's.
So then is it correct that I put droga in both places?
Well, one is like the colloquially. So colloquially, droga is only for narcotics.
Okay.
And I think like in pharmaceutical language you can still use it. Yeah. But you would usually say arzneimittel or medicament.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, but then medicament is it has the corresponding English words.
Yeah.
Medicine. So I will put it there. And then in the application, if we want to stick to one particular word.
But so this is something that is a kind of process that is not automatic. That you split some senses, so you have to then see in each language what the consequences are.
I have to see what is happening on the server. I do changes all the time and probably broke something. That's why the editing doesn't work. But it will work these days. And this is definitely not like a matter in the region. Is it my internet connection? Because yes, it's the internet connection.
With the capital, capital letters, it shows a name, I guess, proper name or family name.
Well, this
Family name.
capitals here.
Yes.
No, all the nouns are in capital. You can see that it's a name if you see PN, PO, GN. This is a name, for example, for second name. Actually, apparently, it can be called John Drug.
If for Russian, even to get a friend, group.
Yeah, this is a mistake, and you see that it's underlined with red, which means that I took it from somewhere. I don't know if it's correct. I think this is wrong.
I think it's a mistake
Yes.
because
No, it's not actually.
chronological.
This is just a translation. Drug is French.
Chronological.
Drug is French. It just happened to mean also something else in French, in Russian. I think this is actually correct.
It looks that the two of you did most of the work. Right? The two of you.
Well,
There are other people who work as well.
there are many people who work on it, so.
But everyone basically has its own project. They work on the infrastructure.
I suggested it as a project in Bulgarian Academy of Sciences and they didn't accept it. But there is a lie there. They say even if you go on the major web page of HPSG, Bulgarian language appears, Bulgarian Academy of Sciences first place. There has never been HPSG in Bulgaria. All people
There
trust
is one
Clay?
by
Kirill Simov.
not Kirill. I just understand that. She works with Kirill.
Oh, I think it's a woman, right?
Yes,
No,
I got the grammar from her, but it's not maintained.
They never had HPSG. There was indeed very nice and well published transformational grammar by a language person. Penchev. There is even a small book, and it's very well structured. He managed very well linguistically to distinguish between active, passive verbs and transformations there. Until the book, the small book, got published, transformational grammars, they disappeared from the whole of formal.
So this is about the drugs, narcotics. No, still doesn't work. Okay, something.
I can also go there.
So I suggested to them that we do GF Bulgarian, no? Not to the language people, not to the Institute of Mathematics. They think that whatever they do, that's it.
I also talked to them about.
Commas after hello, Krasimir, between them.
I also talked to them about creating languages in Bulgarian. I didn't mention anything about GF.
Okay.
Not much interest. But Phil is on
Oh,
Bank, but
you say immediately that I know already the psychology. If something will bring them money, they'll immediately say yes.
they also don't share resources.
Yes, so you cannot find official grammar.
Yes, so
You have to pay in order to get to a lexicon.
this Bulgarian WordNet, the Bulgarian version, is completely done by me, and there are two other WordNets developed in Bulgaria. None of them is sharing between each other and not with me either.
Okay, yes, that's true.
Yes.
Groups they don't
Yeah, so
communicate at all.
we are such a rich country that we can afford to create 3 different versions of the same resource.
So you did very well to do everything by yourself.
Yes, and this is free, you can download it.
Yes. Could you make an announcement of what happy hour means?
It means over there, and I attended at least one, and there is a nice table with